Hello humans, welcome and welcome back to the Carlin's Colorful Creations channel. If you're new to my channel, we shape and polish soft stones using a dremel. If that's something that interests you, please consider subscribing. Today, we're going to be working on this piece of Ethiopian opal, and it's got some great color. It's got a bit of a blue, colorful piece and some potch on the bottom, but when we shine a flashlight through it, you can see that there is a lot of dirt going on and a crack going right down the middle of it. So we're gonna have to work on that, see how it works out. When we measure it, it is 18 by 14 by 10 millimeters. And when we weigh it out as a rough piece, it is 11.74 carats. So if you guys want to see this stone get shaped and polished into a beautiful gem, keep on watching. So first things first, I kind of was hoping that the color bar crack was only superficial and it didn't go all the way through the stone. So I kind of started carving off the sides of the stone to get kind of a puck shape so I could get a better look in there. And I also started taking down some of that dirt on the top because I could see that there was a crack with the flashlight, but I could not see how far the crack went through or if it was worth just taking it down and making a nice oval out of what was left. But it turned out, once I was able to see in there, that crack just went too deep. So I went in with some pliers and I cracked off the piece from the side here, as you could see, and I ended up with a nice big piece and a bit of a smaller piece that I was able to also kind of carve into a stone. So moving forward, I started off again by taking down the sides of the bigger stone, but I first wanted to work on this little piece to make a teardrop out of it because it was just perfect to be turned into a teardrop. So I flattened out the back, I took the sides in, and I started rounding out the top and bringing the sides in to get that good teardrop shape. And since the piece originally had the crack in it, I was worried that maybe this kind of material, that this particular piece was prone to cracking, and I wanted to give the bigger piece just a second or a few minutes, you know, to see if more cracks would develop in it. So once I had the little piece mostly shaped, I started taking down the face of the big piece and bringing in the sides where the potch was. So something about Ethiopian opal is when you have a lot of potch like this, you can't really keep tabs on that the whole time. It eventually will kind of disappear into the water absorption and all get really clear together. So it was kind of nerve-wracking trying to figure out where the color bar was going to sit and if I was going to end up carving away all of the color bar, because sometimes that'll happen with Ethiopian. You'll carve away the whole color bar, but you won't know because it's all clear and it's all absorbed the water. So I was very careful when working on the face of this, and I started with the sides of the stone. And luckily with this piece, I was able to kind of have a bit of an idea where the sides of the stone were and where the potch line was. So that was lucky. And then this is what they ended up looking like after I had shaped them just roughly. You can see that there's a lot of bumps going on, and this is usually how they end up looking before I do the Nova point. And at this point, the big one is 4.45 carats, and the little one is 1 carat, which makes a total of 5.45 carats. So moving on to the Nova points, I did a lot of the shaping on the black Nova point. especially with the doming. As you saw earlier, I left big lumps and bumps in the biggest piece through the first 800 grit diamond bit, and I wanted to be careful to not grind away the entirety of the color bar, and at this point it was pretty difficult to tell because a piece of the color bar and a piece of the pot had kind of blended together, and you couldn't really see any of the color flash of the color bar as it is with Ethiopian. You can see a little bit of the flash sometimes, and sometimes it just totally disappears, and this one was just totally gone. And then moving on to the brown Nova Point, I, at this point, was more concerned with getting out the scratches. And you can kind of just do some shaping on the black Nova Point and then worry about the scratches on the next few Nova Points, because the Nova Points can be pretty forgiving if you're just willing to take a little bit of extra time and check out what's going on with it. And so what I always end up doing is I'll run the piece on the Nova Point all around the sides of the stone, and then I'll get the flat back, and then I'll start rounding the corners, and then I will work on the whole face while rounding the corners to try to get a good shape to it. Now, this piece ended up having some divots and pits in it left over from the dirt seeping through it, so the bigger piece did end up in the finished product having some less than ideal texture on the surface of it. And as long as you are careful when you move on and give it a repolish, you'll be just fine with that. I'm gonna be honest, I was a little impatient because I was really nervous about grinding away the entirety of the color bar, and this will happen. You know, sometimes you're gonna be shaping your stones and you're gonna be super patient and give it all the time in the world, all the time that it needs, and sometimes you're gonna be frustrated and nervous and you're not gonna give it all the time that it needs. But even if you are a little impatient with it, you can always go back to it another day and polish it, or even bring it back to the Nova Points. I know that I've said before, like, that the more often you wet your Ethiopian opal, the more likely it is to have cracking in it later on. And while that is true, I do still oftentimes go back and repolish my stone on the wet Nova Points after the fact, after it's already dried out, just so that I know how much is left of the color bar on pieces like this. And I know it's been a while since I've said it, but on the diamond centered bit, on all my cutting wheel thingies when I'm slicing pieces, and all of my Nova Points, I have a bowl underneath where I have water in it, and I'm constantly dipping into this water to keep it wet. So I had a comment on my last video saying, hey, you should always be dipping in water, and I just want you guys to know I do always dip in water. It's really important so you don't wear out your Nova Points, but also so you don't mess up your lungs. So at this point, the big piece is 4.08 carats, and we have a total of 4.96 carats. And so this is what it looks like at this point. There are a lot of scratches and pits in it. It's not the best shape in the world, but you can see how the color bar has kind of disappeared. There's only a little bit of color left. And same with the little piece. There is a lot of texture there, but this is all texture that should be able to get out in the polish. And then once we have it back to life and it's dried out, there's a lot of good colors going on there, and we just got to work on polishing out all those scratches. And at this point, The big piece is 3.56 carats, and we have a total of 4.33 carats. So moving on to polishing, I use felt tips and my diamond lapidary paste, which is a wax-based paste, and when it heats up it gets a little bit more liquidy. And when you're working with these, especially with a small stone as small as the stone that I'm working on, that's the smaller one, it is really good to be dopping, and as you just saw, the stone flies. And so something about Ethiopian opal is when you drop Ethiopian opal, it is not as likely to chip and crack and shatter as Australian opal because it holds water from the air and it's more likely to bounce. Whereas when you are shaping Australian opal, since it doesn't have the water in it, it's quite a bit more brittle and shatterable. And when you're working with Australian opal, it is imperative to use a dopping stick, and I'll talk about that in a future video where I started working on some Australian opal, and it kind of chipped and broke on me because I dropped it because I wasn't using a dopping stick. So definitely dop if you want to dop, and the only reason why I don't dop is because it just makes me more comfortable. I feel like I can hold on to the stone better, but you should definitely not do that with Australian, and I learned my lesson the hard way. But Ethiopian opal does do well when dropped, so definitely keep that in mind. And definitely throughout all of the polishing grits, check and see how the polish is doing, and if the polish is doing pretty good, you can skip 1 or 2 of the microns. Like you'll see here, I didn't do every single micron, and the polish ended up being alright. The problem that I had was with the divots from the dirt that I wasn't keeping a firm enough eye on because I was all worried about the color bar disappearing. So, you know, do with that what you will, and never be afraid to go back and work on a stone again. And yeah, there's so many differences between working with Ethiopian and working with Australian, and in the future I have some Australian opals I would like to work on so we can kind of compare those differences and we can all learn together about what makes every type of opal formation unique. And Ethiopian opal, you know, it forms in a volcanic area, so it's a little bit different than Australian, which seeps into the cracks and layers. But now that we're all finished up, this is what the final results look like. I got a nice little piece here, and then my big piece, you know, it's pretty darn great. I really like the dark backing on it, and I've even got a little piece of like kind of script digitized pattern there. When we weigh out the finished product, the big one is 3.59 carats, and the little one is 7.7 carats, which makes a total of 4.35 carats. So this is what the piece looked like as a rough piece. It really had something going on there. And this is our biggest finished piece that we got from it. And you can kind of see what I was talking about the little dips and valleys in there. And you can really see that kind of super bright orange digitized pattern going on there. It's so much like script. I want to call it script, but I know that with Ethiopian opal it's a little bit different than Australian opal. And then the little piece that I got here, it's just phenomenal. And you know, it's not like the most symmetrical teardrop in the world, but I'm pretty gosh darn happy with it, and I am very pleased with these results. And now it's giveaway time, and the rough parcel was 55.05 carats. Techno Jock, you won that one. Go ahead and email me. And for the cabochon, the total weight of it is 4.65 carats, and that opal guy, you won that piece. So if you guys just email me and I'll ship those right out to you. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe to my channel and maybe smash that like button if you liked this video. I would appreciate that. And if you have a friend to share this with that friend, you know, it always helps. And, you know, turn on notifications if you're not notified already. And I'll see you guys next time that I post a video. Later.